Hello, and welcome back to any continuing listeners. Thank you for coming back. If you have listened to this show before, you know a couple months ago I talked with Audrey Fox about the souvenir. This time I'm going to talk to one of the co hosts of Offscreenbabble about a movie we both watched as kids, Wild Wild West.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Okay,
excited.
cool. So, yeah, it's Kyle from Offscreenbabble. You just heard him. Hopefully, you heard him. Hopefully, this is working.
Yep.
We're doing something brand new. I usually record on Google Hangouts, but this time I'm doing Skype for the very first time on my own. Technically, when I was on the Filmology podcast, I talked to them through Skype, but I didn't do any of the recording.
Yeah. It's a whole different
Okay,
ball game.
so Kyle, do you remember the first time you watched Wild Wild West?
I don't remember it extremely vividly, but I definitely remember watching it. And the thing that stands out more vividly to me actually is when I went to Wendy's and got a pair of the glasses, the sunglasses that Will Smith wore with one of the meals. So that stood out to me most, I'd say. But I definitely remember seeing the movie and really liking it when I was a kid.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up too, because the thing I remember more so than the movie as a kid was like those kids' meal toys that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got at Wendy's. And I just remember Wild Wild West kind of being everywhere at the time because, Will Smith was everywhere. There was Men in Black, there was Independence Day, and there was Wild Wild West.
Yeah, I loved Men in Black as well, and Independence Day. Actually, I remember when I was a little kid, I came down, I couldn't sleep, and my parents were watching Independence Day, and they're like, "What are you doing? You can't watch this. Go back up to bed." So that's all I remembered about Independence Day, and I finally saw it a few years back, actually.
Oh, that's kind of funny because my parents were a little different. My dad would just kind of rent whatever, and like he'd usually rent like a kids movie, and then like something like rated PG-13 or rated R. And
Mm-hmm.
even from a young age, he was just like, "Okay, yeah, sure, I'll let you watch it."
Yeah.
So I got to watch rated R stuff from a very young age.
Oh yeah, my mom was like, "No, you cannot watch this stuff."
Okay, that's funny.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I said, I remember us renting it on VHS because it was 1999. We didn't have a DVD player yet.
Mm-mm.
And so yeah, I just remember watching on VHS. I remember liking it. I remember the music video more so than the movie. Same thing with Men in Black. I remember the music video way more than the movie itself.
Interesting.
Uh, and so I mean that those are I don't know, just my memories from obviously from when I was a kid, and I hadn't really watched it until I watched it on Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't think I think I saw it on TV quite a few times when I was younger, not like too recently. But I can't remember if I saw it first in the movie theater. I feel like I did, and then just like on TV a bunch.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those movies they'd play on like TNT every weekend, so that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I do remember how I felt about the movie more than like the specific time I watched it though, and kind of like what I sort of liked about it. I don't know if you want to save that for when we really start going into it or not.
Yeah. Okay. So, 'cause, usually, like on my other podcasts, I usually just kind of go with the flow. But for this one, I do usually jot down notes, and I did jot down notes this time.
Cool.
So, the first thing that really stood out to me watching it as an adult is I really like the opening credit sequence for this movie. I thought it was actually pretty cool. It was obviously like a throwback to a lot of old westerns from like the 1960s with the music and the very specific graphics with it. And you could tell it was made by someone who does enjoy westerns.
Yeah, interesting. I'm actually not a big Western person, so I didn't get the reference as much. I saw like a few when I was younger. My best friend's mom would show us some, but so I didn't connect with it as much. But I was just like, wow, this is quite an extensive intro. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, especially because nowadays we don't really get opening credit sequences anymore.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I'm not sure why they started doing that over the past decade. But yeah, this because when I was a kid, I really didn't like westerns. I thought they were really boring.
Mm-hmm.
And but as an adult, the older I get, I find that I really do enjoy them quite a bit now. They're one of my favorite genres. And like I said, this movie you could tell is directed by someone who does enjoy westerns. Whenever like a certain music cue comes up, like whenever Will Smith is gonna like go into action, like the way the music starts up and like what the music sounds like, it really does feel like it's trying to be a throwback to westerns of a certain era.
Yeah. What's interesting, since you brought up the music, I thought they really overused that one song though, which is kind of like the main song, which has like it reminds me of Indiana Jones. I don't know if you felt that at all.
I know what you mean. I mean, to me, it seems like that was Will Smith's personal theme, and it's
Mm-hmm.
similar to like the old like Clint Eastwood movies in the '60s. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, they would reuse that kind of same loop of music again and again,
Mm-hmm.
but it made sense in the way that it's supposed to specifically be his song.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So like when he would come out fighting or something, it would be that song.
Yeah, or like in for a few dollars more, whenever Clint Eastwood like rides into town, there's a certain song that involves whistling, and that's just
Mm.
kind of like his walk-in music.
Yeah, yeah. I liked the music. I was just like, wow, this is the same exact thing again. That's a lot of times.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
it's good.
yeah, I wasn't complaining too much, but yeah,
Yeah.
you're probably right. They probably did reuse a little too much.
Yeah, it was just a little more than I realized before, but
Yeah.
it was good though.
Okay. Okay. So the next thing I noticed, I vaguely remembered this from being a kid, but it was kind of weird seeing this as an adult. That it kind of, at least for that week, it kind of looks like he was living in a water tower. Like it had like a bed in there and like everything. And I don't know, I just thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah, I actually didn't even think about it much when I was a kid, and even this time I didn't think about it too much, and I didn't realize that. But I guess you're right. I was just like, that's weird, but okay. I guess he's just kind of hanging out there.
I mean, because I know for the story, like he was waiting there to scope out that I think it was a post office or something. And but it was just kind of weird that like it's not just he was hiding in the water tower. Like I said, there was like a little bed and a little lamp and like a little table and stuff in there.
Mm. Yeah, I guess I didn't even realize that. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I don't know. I mean, because overall, this movie does have some very weird stylistic choices, but I can't really fault it for that because I feel like a lot of movies nowadays aren't willing to get this weird.
Mm-hmm. You mean stylistic? Because one of the main things I want to go into obviously is like the crazy technological stuff. But are you referring to something else as well?
I mean, that stuff definitely, but just the way like the costumes are designed and like the
Mm.
sets, like it's very specifically weird, or like all the spider imagery for the villain.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, my wife Sade, the co-host of Offscreenbabble with me, was telling me about how the producer of the movie had been wanting to make a movie with a big spider as its villain, just like before even making this movie, and he like couldn't find a movie to do it with, and then finally he was able to do it with this one. So like, it seemed like very overused the amount of spider stuff in it.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too because I had heard that story before that he had pitched it on several different movies
Yeah, yeah.
and nobody wanted to take him up on it, but finally Wild Wild West they were like, okay, we'll do the giant spider thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then I remember even when I was a kid, it was like, because, Will Smith has the one part where he's, with a spider and he's like explaining something in terms of the spider, and then there's the spider symbol on everything, and then the huge spider, and it's like, well, that's a lot of spider stuff.
Exactly. So I do want to talk about. I did have fun watching this movie, but I do want to address that. I do have mixed feelings on it, and I do think there are some problematic things about this film
Mm-hmm.
that kind of bother me more than I thought they would, especially because this movie is only 20 years old. And if that feels pretty recent for it to have certain issues in the script.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if we're gonna be honest, this movie is kind of homophobic and a little misogynistic.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It really, like, way more than I remembered, sexualizes women and like objectifies them like pretty overtly. Where it's just like, wow, yeah,
Exactly, and like there's several times when the two main characters get together, and the movie uses goes out of its way to make a joke at their expense at them possibly being gay, and it
yeah,
just kind of I don't know that was just kind of weird for something again that came out within our lifetime.
yeah. I know it's tough, and especially when you're like, oh, I love this movie, and then you're like, did I know about that and realize that at the time and think it was fine or what? You know, but yeah, it's definitely not a movie that ages as well, for sure. Like there are a few different movies I've seen recently that Sade had thought, oh, that's you're not gonna like that because you liked it when you were younger, and I still liked it, but this one definitely hit a lot differently than other ones I'd seen.
Exactly. I mean, because I was literally 7 years old when this movie came out, so I'm just gonna go ahead and assume I just didn't notice that stuff.
Yeah, I think I was probably 9 or 10.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like just certain shots, like I said, when him and that woman I can't remember her first name for the character, but her name is East. Her last name is East,
Oh
and
yeah.
like she's trying to seduce him in the office, and
Mm-hmm.
there's like that one shot which is completely unnecessary. It's like a cutaway shot where it shows her butt like
Yeah.
sitting down on the desk. And it's weird because it's not like it's a part of the seduction for Will Smith, because obviously he's not seen that. He's standing in front of her, but for some reason the director decided that we needed to see that shot.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like, there was a lot of sexualization and just like that the characters see and stuff, and that was a lot. But yeah, that's an instance of a shot where like that was like totally unnecessary. Like, it wasn't even part of the story at all. It's just like, hey, look, she's gonna show the audience her butt. It's like, what?
Exactly. And then the villain, like all of his minions are women who are
Mm-hmm.
wearing lingerie like the entire movie when they don't necessarily need to.
Yeah.
Um it was I don't know. Again, like I'm trying to think that like even though it was 20 years ago, the 90s technically were in a way a different time than what we have now. It just feels weird because it is really recent.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, thankfully, there's been a pretty good amount of growth since then. Obviously, there's a lot more to go, but it really shows you, like, wow, this if this was acceptable, then that's like, wow, pretty different even that short while ago.
Exactly, because another movie I watched recently that I hadn't seen since I was a kid was The Mask of Zorro, starring Antonio Banderas, and there is a
Oh,
lot of fun to have with that movie too. That came out in 1998,
hmm,
but it completely rubbed me the wrong way because Anthony Hopkins and Catherine Zeta-Jones are literally in brownface in that movie, pretending to be Mexican when they're both Welsh actors.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I didn't realize. I didn't even know until I was an adult that I thought she was Mexican. I thought Catherine Zeta-Jones was Mexican when I was a kid because of this movie,
Oh,
and then
really?
I found out as an adult. Oh no, she was literally wearing brown makeup, and she's actually from Wales. Same thing with Anthony Hopkins.
Wow. Yeah. I haven't. I saw that I think like once when I was a kid, and also I think kind of feels a little similar, probably because it came out at the same time. But I was like, oh yeah, this is so cool, and I have not rewatched it since then. That is interesting to hear. I definitely didn't remember that.
Me neither. I was completely shocked when I watched it earlier this year because
Mm-hmm.
it's still actually a pretty good movie. It just again rubs me the wrong way when Anthony Hopkins walks on screen and his skin has obviously been darkened, and he's
Yeah.
going by the name Diego de la Vega again
Mm.
as a Welsh actor.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a little much.
Yeah. Okay, to get back to Wild Wild West, so one thing I did notice when I was a kid, I thought was kind of weird, and I still don't know if this is actually physically possible, how the villain doesn't have an entire bottom half.
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand there are people with disabilities who may not have legs anymore necessarily for one reason or another, but he even lists the parts that he doesn't have. He doesn't have like a bladder anymore. He doesn't have part of his small intestine. I'm like, how
Yeah.
does your digestive system work anymore then?
Yeah, yeah. As soon as he said small intestine, I was like, Is he saying like that's gone? Because how does that work? That is odd. I mean, but the thing is, the technology in this movie is absolutely insane. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. You just like created everything you needed or whatever. Like it's just insane the technology that they have. So I don't know. They just kind of brushed over that, but yeah, it was kind of odd for sure.
Exactly, because I mean, yeah, this movie does have like fantastical elements, like you were saying,
Hmm.
but at the same time, when you're in that scene and when he's explaining it, you're just like, wait, what?
Yeah, you're like, yeah. It was kind of a long speech. It was all thrown in there, so you could just go like, yeah, whatever, you know. But yeah, if you like break it down, you're like, what'd you just say?
Exactly. But luckily, like later in that scene, like him and Will Smith start kind of exchanging words, and so it kind of helps you forget about it a little bit, especially because if I remember correctly, directly after that, they have another action scene, almost like they wanted you to kind of forget about some of the weird details.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
Okay, and so I just want to talk about the villain a little bit. I think it's interesting. It took me about halfway through the movie to realize that his facial hair was supposed to look like spider legs. I don't know if you
Oh
noticed that.
no, I did not.
Yeah, about halfway through, I'm like, oh, those lines across his face. There's four different ones. That kind of there's he's so obsessed with spiders that his beard literally is shaped like spider legs.
Wow, that is really ridiculous. This is way too much spider stuff now. Like
Exactly.
before, I was like, yeah, it's too much, but that's taking it another level. And it's weird because he never actually talked about spiders much at all.
Yeah, but exactly. Like he didn't really necessarily talk about spiders, but he was again willing to put them on everything. Like there's even I think a part where there's like a picture of a spider like on his like evil flag and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's weird because it's like maybe the script didn't do much with it, but the imagery was extremely heavy.
Exactly. But I mean, again, like I said, at least this movie is willing to get weird in those ways aesthetically. When films nowadays, I feel like aren't willing to do that because they're afraid of losing the mainstream audience.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and this was supposed to
Because
be a very mainstream movie, right? It was like a very big budget.
exactly, but I feel like at that point in time, they were still willing to take enough more risks than they are now because they didn't have to compete with streaming like the movie studios are now.
Yeah, yeah. And like the juggernaut of like that is Disney and like every movie being a huge hit.
Exactly. And so like I don't for some reason it made me think about when you and Sade were talking about Rocket Man a few months ago on your podcast,
Yeah.
and you were talking about how you thought the musical numbers weren't as fantastical as you thought they were going to be. Like, and I, as much as I love that movie, I do agree with that. Like, it does seem like they in Rocket Man they toned it down a little bit because I have seen movies from like the 80s where they're fantasy musicals and they just kind of go completely insane with it.
Mhm. Yeah, I
And
don't
so
think I've seen movies like that, but just from the trailer, I was expecting it to be like very fantastical. And so, I don't do well with really weird stuff a lot. Like I appreciate that it's good that people can step out of the box and do that, but sometimes it's kind of difficult for me, and I'm trying to get over that more and more. But like Rocket Man, it seemed like, oh, this is gonna go pretty far out, so hopefully I can, be on board with it. But it was really like one scene that was like that.
exactly, it really did feel like they were trying to play it safe, and that's just how the studios seem to be now. They're not willing to go too weird because they don't want to lose the mainstream audience,
Yeah.
which makes me think that a movie like Wild Wild West could absolutely never get made today.
Yeah, aside from the problematic elements, but also, yeah, the weirdness probably would be difficult to sell.
Exactly. And then let's see, looking at my notes. So I don't know if you noticed this too. I didn't realize until the third act that one of his minions, who was driving, I can't remember what vehicle she was driving, like she was helping drive the giant spider, is was Mila Jovovich
That name sounds familiar. I'm trying to remember who that is.
from the Resident Evil movies.
Oh, okay, yeah. I haven't seen them, but I know who you're talking about now. Yeah, so it
Yeah,
didn't stick out to me as much, but yeah.
it was weird because she had only, I think, like one line, one or two lines throughout the movie, but I just found it odd and kind of funny because this was obviously a few years before the first Resident Evil movie. And so it was just kind of weird to see her pop up in this. I mean, at one point, she even got to shoot Will Smith and he fell off the spider.
Oh, that was her. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know, that just kind of blew my mind. I was like, wait, what? What are you doing in this movie?
Yeah, it's interesting because something that's odd about it is like with all the objectification and sexualizing of women, they were also like strong women like doing all of the tasks, like he wasn't doing anything, they were taking care of everything for him and like, shooting people and all this stuff, and so it's like a really odd balance there.
Exactly, because like you have someone like Selma Hayek's character who
Yeah.
you do find out at the end of the movie did end up manipulating the male characters in order to get where she needed to go. But at the same time, you have certain scenes where she's like really hysterical, like when she took one of the billiard balls that
Yeah.
released the gas and threw it like in the locked room where they were,
Yeah.
knocking them all out.
Yeah, watching that again is just like, wait, what? That makes no sense. Like, why would she do that at all?
Exactly. So, like you said, it's a really weird balance of women having some strong traits, but at the same time being objectified. And then, like I said, like through that example, like hysterical for no reason.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. What was my next note? Okay. So one of the things I did remember about the film was the collars that they get put around their neck that are magnets.
Oh yeah.
But watching that sequence as an adult, I just kept thinking this isn't how magnets work because there's a couple times where they dip down and the blades fly past them and then turn around. But
Yeah,
I feel like if they're magnets, then when they dip down, wouldn't the blades just go down too and just kill them?
absolutely. I'm like, a lot of the technology in this is just too ridiculous, and that one where it's just like, oh yeah, it's just like really high powered magnets. It's like, oh, so the magnets are making like long loops around to turn around. Like, what the heck? Like, it's not just a magnet, and a magnet can't, pull that thing, having it spin like that. It's just so ridiculous.
Exactly. I mean, but it is still a fun sequence when
Oh
you're
yeah.
watching it. It just doesn't make any sort of scientific sense.
No, and that's the thing with the technology in this movie. Like I remember even when I was a kid, I was like, "What's going on here? This is like a western," and I wasn't familiar with the term steampunk or what that meant at all, and I'm still only slightly. Uh, but with the technology in it, I was like, "This is really weird. What year are we in, and where's this technology coming from?" And then quickly and early on, I was just like, you know what? Whatever. I'm just going to enjoy it and see that there are these cool, crazy things happening, And I felt like that's how I had to approach it again this time. But this time it was even more like, this is insane. The kind of technology that they have and are able to make like this. But, it's fun though.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. So for my next note, I think it's interesting. So for the first two thirds of the film, the villain doesn't really talk about his evil plan. He just kind of talks about he wants to take control of the United States. And then in the third act, when he's given his speech about what his actual plan is, I thought it was kind of interesting because it's really not that evil when you think about it. Like he wants to give those six states back to Mexico. He wants to give Florida back to Spain. He basically wants to give the land back to the people that originally had it.
Yeah, and then I don't know the part that he took for himself who had that before, so maybe that would be worse, but I'm not sure what that was.
I think it was just that was above where Mexico was, so that would have been like northern states like Idaho and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Probably like the Midwest, I think, because he said he was going to give the 13 colonies,
Yeah.
which is like New York, East Coast area back to Britain,
Mm-hmm.
and so it still would have been him taking away Native American lands, but
Yeah.
I think it was interesting that he wanted to give land back to Mexico and Spain.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, especially like Mexico, I was like, because you think like, oh, he's really racist and like with the slavery and everything, and I wasn't expecting him to do anything for Mexico, and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Exactly. So, like, wait a minute. So, is his plan really that evil? But I mean, I guess he probably would have done evil things when he was in charge. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting in that way. I mean, yeah, the question is like, then would he bring back slavery as well? And he didn't say anything about that, but so that would be a question there.
Exactly. I mean, that, like I said, yeah, that's like a maybe. Maybe he would have done something really horrible, like bring black slavery in his area that he ruled, and
Yeah,
that's where the more evil parts of his plan would have come from. It was just kind of weird in that scene the way he presented it. It was just kind of weird that the villain of the movie wanted to give lands back to the people who it was taken from.
yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. And I mean, that's how he would gather the support, I guess, of all those people to join in.
Exactly. And then for my last note, I just wrote down Kenneth Branagh. I think he was the one that played the villain. Well, let me double check right now. Yeah, he was. That's okay. So that's part of why he gave such a good performance. I didn't even realize that it was Kenneth Branagh giving the performance, but I guess I could see it after watching the movie.
Hmm. I don't think I'm familiar with him. Maybe I know him from something else.
Did you watch Murder on the Orient Express a couple years ago?
No, I don't think I did actually. Yeah.
Okay, he often like directs and stars in his own movies. He's done like a lot of Shakespeare stuff. He directed that live action remake of Cinderella, which was really good. He did Murder on the Orient Express. He
Okay.
was in My Week with Marilyn.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm looking through his filmography a little. I see Avengers: Infinity War. I saw that, but yeah, I don't think I've seen a lot of his stuff. But he looks familiar, aside from this movie.
Okay, yeah, because I've recommended that you guys watch Cinderella to Sade. I don't know if you guys would actually ever do it, but in my opinion, that is the best live action Disney remake to date.
Yeah, I think we definitely want to see a couple of them. I think Cinderella, and I think there was maybe Jungle Book. I think is the other one that's been highly recommended. So I think we have plans to watch those two. It's just tough doing that at the same time as keeping up with all the new movies.
Exactly, I understand, but definitely those are the two best ones in my opinion. Those are my two favorite ones.
Yeah,
So obviously they're highly recommended.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so now that we've more or less gone through the story of the film, what are your final thoughts on Wild Wild West?
Um, I I still enjoyed it a bit. Definitely not as much as when I was a kid. I think, at that point, being that young, I didn't really understand the issues with it. Also, in that time period, the objectification of women in movies and stuff was more prevalent and, very problematic, obviously, but wasn't aware of those issues as much. So I definitely liked it more when I was a kid. The humor hit me better back then. I think it fell a little more flat at this stage. However, there were still some funny parts. The fight scenes, some of them were kind of good. Some were okay. I could see some misses and stuff. The technology aspect was kind of fun. The coolest thing to me when I was a kid and even now was kind of the gadgets and Artemis Gordon and like all the cool stuff he made and like the notepad and pen that came out of his spring-loaded stuff. Like all that stuff was just like really cool and fun to see. So I thought it was pretty inventive and interesting, and the train with the different flipping things. So it was definitely harder to watch at this point in life, but it was still a bit fun, and I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I think I have similar thoughts to you. Like I said, I did enjoy it as a kid, but that's because obviously I was 7. I didn't really see the problematic elements. Obviously, as an adult, those are more apparent. But if you were to take out those problematic elements, I think this movie, for the most part, does age well. Even the effects I thought looked pretty good.
Yeah,
Even the giant spider honestly looks pretty good for being from 1999.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I was surprised how good that looked. There were like a few select shots in the movie where I was like, eh, but other than that, like the major effects and stuff looked pretty great.
Exactly, and I actually did, for the most part, really like the chemistry between Will Smith and Kevin Kline. It is kind of sad that this is the only movie, if I'm correct, that they did together.
Yeah,
Um, I would watch them in another movie together. I thought they were actually really good.
yeah, I did like them together. I thought Kevin Gline did a great job. Will Smith obviously did a good job as well. But yeah, the chemistry between them was pretty cool.
Okay, and then before we go, do you know the movie that Will Smith turned down to be in Wild Wild West?
Hmm. I don't believe I do. Maybe when you say it, I may have. Sade may have told me.
Okay, this is insane. He was originally going to be cast as Neo in The
I
Matrix,
right as you were
but
about to say it, I was like, wait, was it the Matrix?
apparently, from what I've heard, obviously this is a second hand. I don't know if this is true.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he read the script and he didn't understand it, so he passed on The Matrix, and that's why he's in Wild Wild West.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Although this one was pretty weird. But The Matrix is extremely hard to understand if you just like read the script, probably. But yeah, wow, what a missed opportunity.
Can you imagine if he had done a song and music video for The Matrix instead of Wild Wild West?
That would have been interesting. Yeah, that would have been a very different movie. I can't imagine him playing Neo. Like it would be so different from the original. I don't know. That would be so weird.
Exactly, that would be weird. But I was actually thinking about this after watching movies like Aladdin. I really do wish Will Smith would do a song and music video for his movies now.
Oh yeah, yeah, that would be interesting. I don't remember the music video
Because
for
I
this much, but
It's actually really good. It's like probably better than the movie. I watched the music video several times recently, and the music video actually holds up better than the movie does.
I believe that. It's not enough time to be as problematic, probably.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you, Kyle, so much for sitting down and talking with me about Wild Wild West.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Alrighty, so thank you for listening to everybody out there listening. I hope you enjoyed our talk about Wild Wild West, and I will see you, or you'll hear me next time, whenever I get together with someone when we feel like we need to discuss a movie.